Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to another video. We're going to be making breakfast. It is Sunday and I felt like being a little extra. So I had some chopped tomatoes, onions, green peppers, and I also used my new vegetable peeler and I shredded some carrots. And then what we're going to be doing is I have some boiled saltfish, or you can also look in the supermarket for codfish. They're the same thing. And I boiled it and I stripped it into tiny pieces, and then I added a little bit of vegetable oil to my pot, and then I'm basically gonna stir fry all of this until they've softened. I also added a Scotch bonnet pepper to my dish. It doesn't make the dish entirely spicy if you take it out on time, but if you leave it in too long, you may end up with a spicy dish. So I've always said in the past that if you don't want your dish to be spicy, try to keep the pepper as whole as possible. Also, don't let it fry directly on the oil or at the bottom of the pot. Once it's sitting in the pot, you should be just fine. So I went ahead and added some Old Bay seasoning, because Old Bay seasoning is extremely tasty with a little bit of seafood, and since saltfish is seafood, I went ahead and add some of that. I also added some black pepper, and I'm using my Jamaican all-purpose seasoning, my Maggie all-purpose seasoning. And then I am basically gonna go in with some garlic powder as well. You guys know my bottles are never labeled, so this is actually garlic powder. After that, I'm gonna give everything a quick stir. You're cooking this on low heat, by the way. You do not want to have this on high heat. Your vegetables or your seasonings might start sticking to the pot, so make sure you're cooking this on low heat. For the next section, you do have the option of using broad beans or butter beans. I usually cook with butter beans, however, I was out, so my broad beans worked just fine. Both of them are soft. I do prefer the butter beans, however, because they're just so soft and creamy. But for this dish, I actually used broad beans, and I'm not gonna add any more seasoning. I'm just gonna incorporate everything together, make sure it's evenly distributed, and then let it simmer on low heat for about 5 minutes. So now I'm gonna go ahead and prep my fried dumplings. I did use a recipe from the Reina's kitchen, but I made some slight changes. So my version was actually 3 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 tablespoon of sugar. I used brown sugar, she used white sugar. Also a half tablespoon of salt, and I used a half tablespoon of baking powder. Also 1 cup of cold water. I didn't use all the water, so I guess you kind of just have to gauge with that. But for your butter, make sure that your butter is room temperature. So if you're watching this and you're cooking with me, you can try taking out your butter from now on, so that by the time we get to that stage, your butter will be room temperature. Now what you see me doing here is I'm actually sifting my 3 cups of flour, because it made my dumplings so much softer. Guys, if I had known that sifting your flour made your dumplings this soft, I would have been doing it a long time ago. Usually my dumplings are, you can bite into it, they're like a cake texture, but they're not like soft to the touch. They're like crispy on the edges, soft on the inside, and doughy. That's usually my dumpling recipe, but with this new recipe, it's actually soft all around. So I definitely will be using this recipe again in the future. I absolutely love it. As I mentioned before, I did make some changes though. So as you saw earlier, those were the clumps that I got out of the flour. You want to discard of that, and I did this 3 times because, like I said, it's 3 cups of flour. as you guys are fully aware, that purple measuring cup is a tablespoon. So that's why I'm advising you guys go half on the baking powder. You don't have to use 1 tablespoon of baking powder. I was following a recipe, but I did not like the slightly overwhelming taste of the baking powder. So I went ahead and I also added my salt, sugar. Now I'm just going to add my butter. Yes, my butter is not cold. I just had an issue getting it out of the cup, so I ended up using my fingers to pry it out. But after that, once we've gotten everything inside the bowl, I'm going to go ahead and use my finger and kind of just mix everything together. So for this step, you want to make sure that your butter is spread out into the flour. There are no clumps of butter. So before I added my water, I kind of, squeezed the butter here and there, ensure that it was evenly distributed in the flour, so that when I'm frying my dumplings, there's not like a clump of butter in the dumpling.
So then, why?
Next, I began adding my ice cold water. Again, this was 1 cup, but I did not use the entire cup. You want to just use the water until you've gotten a dough texture. You don't want your dumplings to be sticking to the bowl. It shouldn't be sticky. It shouldn't be gooey. You want a tight, firm texture, and you guys will see exactly what I mean. Don't add too much water to your dough, because once you do that, it's going to be all mushy, and then you're going to have to add flour. If you do add a little bit too much water, no need to worry. Just take some flour and sprinkle over your dough to kind of dry up the excess liquid. And also, when you're rolling your dumplings, be sure to flour your cutting board when doing so. That will prevent the dumplings from sticking to the cutting board. When I'm done making my dough, I went ahead and I added a moist paper towel, and I covered my dough and I put it in the fridge for about 30 minutes. Some persons prefer to leave their dough overnight. I did not have so much time. So here I floured my board, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm gonna begin rolling my dumplings. If you have nails, you can wear gloves. I don't have long nails, so I didn't need to wear gloves. And I rolled them in a circular motion. So I'm rolling. This was very fun for me. And when I'm done, I did take my finger and I made like a small indentation in the middle of the dumpling to help with frying, because I don't have a deep fryer. I'll be using a skillet. So I kind of made a small indentation in the middle to allow the dumpling to fry properly.
So then, why?
Some people prefer to roll and put in the pot, but I want all of my dumplings to be cooked at the same time. So what I'm doing here is I'm rolling them, putting them on the board, and then I'm gonna add them at once. Guys, look at my dumplings. They're so beautiful and they're so cute. So when you're frying your dumplings, make sure that it's on low to medium heat, but I wouldn't even recommend completely medium. Make sure it's closer to the lower side, if you know what I mean, because dumplings do not require high heat. They will burn easily. If it is that you want to get that golden brown color, I guess you can bump up your temperature a little bit, but for me, I fried these on low heat and they came out absolutely perfect. You can use a tongue to turn them, but I'm using a spoon because I don't want anything to make an indentation in the dumplings. This is how they're looking when I took them out of the pot. I did use my same bowl that I made the dough in, and I just rested some paper towels in there, and then I added my dumplings to kind of drain off the oil. Next, I was feeling fancy, so I decorated my cucumber using my vegetable peeler and fork, and I cut them into thin slices along with some fresh tomatoes because I went to the market yesterday like an independent young lady, and I had my fresh salad. So that was my salad for the day, and this is how my final meal is looking. That extra peel that I got from the vegetable peeler, I used it to make a little rose in the middle of the beans and saltfish. And guys, funny story, when I was taking this picture, I had such a huge problem with the dumplings because they kept falling off. But thank you for watching the video. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.